participate in this geographic base? How can we be effectively productive? And how can we integrate into this community?
Can I ask you how much water Twynham has altogether?
Well, it's hard to measure that.
One of the things that as a journalist I've been looking for is a register of who owns the water in this country, and I can't find it.
Well, as far as I'm aware, there is no register of who owns the water.
Because until that time, presumably those worried about water hoarders and speculators will continue to worry, won't they?
That's right.
As trading takes off, farmers are worried about a serious oversight by state governments, a failure to take old licences into account.
When we set up licences, we never expected everybody to use all the water. We expected people to save some and not develop it.
Many farmers owned licences without using the water. They're known as sleepers or dozers. Trading has suddenly given water and these licences value. Many have been sold and the water rights activated. But when more water had to be found for these licences, it could not come from the river because of the cap. Instead, all licence holders have had to take a cut.
Under a cap in New South Wales, as soon as you activate any sleeper and dozer water, it means that other irrigators get less, and they don't get any compensation when they get less.
Wouldn't it have been a unique opportunity to buy out for quite a nominal amount all the sleepers and dozer licences in Australia some years ago?
Well, if you're asking my personal opinion on that, I think the answer can only be yes, but it was missed. Much as I know I'm responsible for a lot of things, I can't wear any responsibility for that.
It's the states that control the water. The grim news is there's still over 2,000 gigalitres worth of sleeper licences yet to be activated, 16% of river flow. At next month's COAG meeting of federal and state governments, John Anderson has been charged by the Prime Minister to fix up water. He wants to take trading national, but water takes up more of his worry time than even Telstra.
If we get it right, there need not be losers. We need to treat fairly those who are going to take the shock of change, and I mean treat them fairly.
They like timber.
The river, too, needs to be treated fairly. Trading has yet to deliver any more water for it. There is a growing belief that the market can solve environmental problems. Do you agree?
No, it can't. That's not to say the market is bad, but in itself it's not going to do anything to help the river system, and in some instances it could hurt it.
Take the trading of water downriver to South Australian grape growers. Water now travels further before it's sucked out, but not at a time that's best for the river.
The water will probably be used on a high-value vineyard somewhere in January, February and March, and they're the very months that the environmentalists would tell you that the river was traditionally low. So are we creating environmental flows, or are we creating an environmental hazard? And that's one of the really quite difficult things about trade.
The water debate drags on through the worst drought in living memory. Last year, the tabloid press ran this photo of a little girl used to capture the misery of a land of drought. She had never seen rain, let alone flooding rain.
It's 7 after 7 on Thursday, the 3rd of October. It's going to be dry outside and there's no rain anywhere across Australia.
The next day, Sydney woke to a very commercial launch of the drought appeal Farmhand, which would raise over $20 million for farmers.
Our simple appeal is, don't sit on the fence. Let's give the farmers a hand.
There's enough media heavyweights at this table to sink a government.
The message delivered by one of those heavyweights was a return to the old schemes of the 1950s, a dream of drought-proofing Australia.
All those rivers up there, they could all be turned inland and used. And then you could flood your river system in drought time. Dam the water, flood the river system, irrigate off the rivers, build dams.
Alan Jones' outdated message galvanised a very different group of people.
There were a number of us who were just very, very angry at this idea that we could drought-proof Australia by turning the rivers inland. I mean, here was this view that had grown up, I suppose, as part of Australia's tradition and had got us into all of this trouble.
A less famous millionaire was also outraged. Rob Purvis has big dollars in radiology and nursing homes, but he devotes 2 days a week to his favourite pastime, conservation.
Everything I've been involved in business, nothing has given me more satisfaction than being involved in this. To be in a position where you can affect change about something you're very passionate about, and I'm very passionate about environmental issues, is what it's about to me.
The businessman put $1.5 million behind his own team of heavyweights in opposition to the old-style thinking.
They're leaders in their field, and that was really important because in bringing that group together, whatever they said had to be, without question, couldn't be questioned.
In October last year, 12 hand-picked scientists, economists and water buffs met for dinner at the Wentworth Hotel in Sydney to counter the emotive politics of Alan Jones. By 11 that night, the new Wentworth Group had agreed on a blueprint of 5 points to fix the water crisis. Among them, more water for the river and a new definition of farmers' rights to water. Sounds great on paper, but how do you do it?
Well, I think that's a fair comment. What surprised us was that there was virtually no one got up and said, no, these are the wrong things to do. All of the discussion was, how do you do it?
We need to talk about how we're going to establish this Murray-Darling Basin Environmental Water Trust to recover some water for the environment.
months, environmentalist Peter Cullen and economist Mike Young have finessed a radical idea that they say will help the river and deliver equity to irrigators.
Yep. Hi. Good day, Peter. How are you?
I'm very well. Good to see you.
I'm sorry to hold you up.
No, that's fine.
Okay. How are you?
Actually, Michael Young.
Michael, how are you?
Pleasure.
You've got all sorts of interesting reports that I'm not sure I want to hear about.
Wentworth wants to use the markets, but introduce a new player who will work for the river itself. The idea is that government creates a trust to buy up water which will stay in the river as environmental flow.
We would see that environmental trust being able to buy and sell water, so that during a drought when the farmers desperately need that water and the environmental needs are still there but can be less, we would sell water to the irrigators.
Make a lot of money.
And make some money. And during wet periods, when the water price is down, that is when we want quite a lot of the environmental water, because that's when we want to top up floods to wetlands and floodplains. So in any sort of reasonable market use, this could well be self-funding within a decade.
Peter Cullen wants the taxpayer to spend $150 million a year for the trust over 10 years, funnelled through federal and state governments. The trust would pay farmers for their water, and that's far cheaper than the $3,500 a megalitre compensation some irrigators want.
Ute loads of cash would be very popular with the farmers, but why would you give them that when you can buy it on the water market for, say, $700 a megalitre? So that's why I think a market solution is better, rather than the fantasies we're hearing about levels of compensation.
If this all sounds too good to be true, Tim Fisher says it is. There aren't enough sellers in the market.
It'd probably take the best part of a century to get enough water to do anything useful with. It could inflate the price of water, it could annoy a lot of people.
There is a balance required between the rate at which you can get water and whether you distort the market.
I just don't think we ought to be playing or experimenting with the Murray like that.
If done properly, the Wentworth reformers believe the trust could deliver for the river, where bureaucracy has failed.
In my view, we should start the journey, and we should be recovering 100 gigalitres a year for the environment, and over the next 4 or 5 years we'll be able to work out when is the best place to stop recovering that. But we should make a start rather than have endless procrastination.
Under the Wentworth plan, the old set volume of water under a licence would go. Instead, water rights would be flexible, depending on river health. A licence would mean a proportionate share in the whole system, where the river's needs are set aside first, then the rest allocated.
We've come here as Europeans with a European legal system and European ways of life that are well adapted to surviving in the Northern Hemisphere, but they have no place in Australia. And the idea that you can do as those irrigators suggest, of take this water that's already overcommitted and that's not there every year anyway, and say, I've got a European-style basket of rights in my hand here and that's mine, just won't work here. It'll leave you without a country in future. You won't have any place in Australia if you continue to think like that.
It's understood that the federal government is attracted to the trust idea. But Wentworth's thinking is sensitive. Even its members don't agree on how the pain should be shared. And irrigators are hostile. What do you make of the Wentworth Group?
The Wentworth drugs.
Is that what you call them?
No, I think that some of them need to get out and have a closer look at what really happens out on the ground.
I really don't understand this this love affair with the Wentworth Group. A lot of politicians we talk to tell us how good the Wentworth Group are. And I think some of their work on land clearing may have been quite credible, but the stuff on water that I've seen is far too simple, and I think the answers are going to be a lot harder than that. It's going to require a lot better science and a lot more cooperation.
It's the simplicity of market forces at work that appeals to economist Mike Young.
The lovely thing about markets is it only involves willing people. If you use those sorts of processes to drive the entire repair and restoration of health to the River Murray, you've only got willing people doing it. And if people are all willing to contribute to the solution, then we don't have a problem.
Except if their backs are to the wall.
Now, if their backs are to the wall and they're still willing to help solve the problem, they're doing it because it's the best option for them. And they can then be part of the solution. And if they do sell out all their water and go on to another lifestyle, they're doing it because they think they will be better off doing that.
Only $1 given away. Come on, $1. Have a look, lady. Beautiful collies. Only $1 each. I need a collie. It's a Christmas present. Yes? How many? One?
The tragedy in the water debate is that those driving our irrigation industry to expand, the millions of urban consumers buying up their fresh fruit and veg as cheaply as they can, don't realise that they are the problem.
Think about the lettuce that you just bought for $1 or whatever it is. Have you paid for the salt that the growing of that lettuce washed into the river? Have you paid for the damage that regulating the river in a way to feed that lettuce and get it to grow has actually incurred?
If the community of Australia want more water in our river for good reason, and let's hope it is for good reason, there's some really good outcomes, they've got to pay for it.
If Australians want healthy rivers and the food those rivers produce, it's not enough to leave the solution to water traders and farmers. The consumer must also share in the true costs.
You can join reporter Tikki Fullerton along with key players in the water debate in an online